I'll just give you the whole speech in one line. It's that if we can get babies, children, and young people to have social and emotional skill, they're not going to go far wrong. Thank you very much. But that's basically what I'm going to say, and it's really what I set out to do in the UK, with some success and some not success. But in essence, I think what I'm trying to do today, being your guest in your country, is to actually make sure that everybody in this room realizes, whether they work for Roots of Empathy, whether they're a coordinator, whether they're an academic, whether they're a practitioner in another field, you are part of a massive early intervention family. Roots of Empathy is a very, very important part of that from my point of view. That's why I'm closely associated with it. But you are not alone. It's one of the things that Brian mentioned at the end of his contribution. You are not on your own fighting in a corner with nobody else doing something similar. There are lots and lots of us around, not only in Canada, but across the whole of the planet, who believe that early intervention in all its forms, and that's not just the 0 to 5s, not just newborns, but it's actually the whole life cycle. You'll see me doing this a lot. People recognize me across a crowded room. Oh, that's got to be Graham Allen. He's doing his salute again. And you can do the salute, and it automatically makes you an early intervener, that you are talking about an intergenerational cycle. Just helping the baby right now, very commendable, glad we're doing it, but that baby is going to be the parent of the next generation. That baby will continue that great work that all of us in our different ways are contributing towards. So, having stood down from being a Member of Parliament, I'm now sort of taking it upon myself to sort of tour the globe and spread the good word on early intervention. And so I'm absolutely open to anybody speaking to me. You can have a look on the screen there. There's at the bottom, there's my email address. You can also check in on a daily tweet that I do, Early Intervention News. You are featured today. Also, there's links within this presentation. Everyone, if you want, you can have this presentation and you'll see links to the stuff that I've been involved in, so you can pick that up if you want, for free. I believe in this stuff, and I believe it's better to be out there and for you guys, if you wish, to spread it around. But in order just to set the scene and not take too much of your time, I'd just like to run with Leah's consent, who is my technical advisor. I'm a total technical incompetent, so Leah's helping me out as usual. A little cartoon that I did with the guys from the Center for the Developing Child at Harvard. It's only 3 minutes, but it gives you a little bit of an idea of where we're coming from.
What if you could take action to reduce crime, improve health and education levels, increase family incomes, national and local government revenues, and improve the quality of life in communities throughout your area? Where would you begin? Science tells us that we may find the solutions to these complex social problems in early childhood, where the architecture of the brain begins to form. Brain architecture is built over time, shaped by experiences, starting in the earliest years of life. The most important experiences come from the environment of relationships that interact with each child. Parents, extended family, and caregivers of all kinds. But serious adversity early in life can disrupt healthy brain development. Both brain architecture and behavior are increasingly difficult to change as individuals get older, so what happens early matters for a lifetime. Now imagine you can take action to improve the lives of babies, children, and young people, as well as the quality of life in this community. Where and when would that action be most effective? The links between policy, parenting, and brain architecture become much more clear when we can see how formative events and family and community environments affect child development. For example, policymakers want to make their community safer and healthier, or improve children's learning, or reduce the cost of social problems. A child raised in this environment may experience lower levels of stress and more opportunities for learning. That leads to sturdy brain architecture and a healthy stress response system, which enables the child to build an early foundation for social and emotional skills that lead to improved school achievement and readiness for work, life, and raising great families of their own. Positive early experiences can also reduce levels of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. Improved physical and mental health and higher attainment levels can have positive effects across society, like reduced crime and increased income and tax revenues. Policies affect both individuals and communities, so making wise choices that support early brain development can improve health, behavior, and learning throughout life to give everyone the bedrock to realize their full potential. The Early Intervention Foundation will assess, advocate, and advise on the best early intervention policies and practices. Please visit our website for more information.
So we wanted somewhere that everybody could go, because I started off wanting to do something about early intervention, but there was no help out there. By a twist of fate, having organised the parliamentary rebellion against Tony Blair's decision to go to war in Iraq, I found myself off of Tony Blair's Christmas card list. Inexplicable, I know. And so I therefore thought, rather than attempting to climb the governmental or ministerial ladder, which would have been no-hoper, that I would become sort of a hyper-constituency MP. I thought I did well before, but just really dedicated myself to that. And Nottingham North, my constituency, was, as Mary Merita said, and is sadly, the most deprived area in England in terms of its statistics on education and skills. It's what I might call, forgive me stereotyping, white working class former municipal housing estates, as far as the eye can see. People who were smashed by manufacturing. People who, incidentally, if we don't give them hope, will turn to other things, as we've seen perhaps south of the border, certainly in Brexit in my country and many other places. And I want to talk about some politics as well. I want to talk about early intervention, but you can't avoid talking about anthropology, culture, politics, and whether you like it or not, you are involved in all those things. What you do matters in all those things as well. So looking at the next slide, back to, can we all do this now? Yeah, the intergenerational cycle. As a brand new, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed Member of Parliament in 1987, I met Sharon. She was 16 years of age, came to my advice surgery. As a Member of Parliament in the UK, you're rightly expected to do an open advice surgery for anybody who wants to come and see you on a Friday night or a Saturday morning when you've done a week's work in the House of Commons. And she said, Mr. Allen, can you help me? I've got a problem with my housing, nursing the baby. I've got a problem with my social security benefits. So, yeah, of course. Wrote the letters, made the phone calls, and I was able to help Sharon. And yeah, I think you're probably all ahead of me by now. The baby, Tracy, shows up in 2003 and says, Mr. Allen, my mum said, you helped her a few years ago, can you help me too? But for the fact that I've stood down, I was expecting Bethany, or is it Kate, Tracy's baby, to come along 2020, but I've missed that. That joy now passes to my successor. But what it does, and all the people you know, whether you know people in policing or health, education, your local council people, whoever they are, you know the same story because you've got the same story about, well, I did help them and then it comes round again. Police, The cops are absolutely superb on this, who say, I arrested the grandfather for aggravated domestic violence. I arrested the father for a violent burglary, and now I'm going around to pinch the son and arrest that person too, because he's been seen using a knife in the street. I've got to keep going back. Why do we do this? Now, of course, you have a reaction when you see that in your own field. You've got to deal with the emergency. But some, if not most of what we have to do is about eliminating that cycle by ensuring that with proper social and emotional capability, that those children grow up able to break out of that vicious cycle and create a virtuous one of their own. And that's, in essence, again, what I regard as being the central thing about early intervention. So, yeah, there's my definition. I'll keep popping that up just to remind people. There are about 25 slides in this. You're not going to see all of them, but you can see all of them if you want to see some of the detailed work that's been done on the number of words heard by a child of a working class family compared to a middle class family. And indeed, the percentage of those words that are bad words heard by those children too. That one. There's stuff about how a bright child from a working class background crosses over with a child who's not so bright but from a middle class background. That next slide shows that there is that crossover. So there's inbuilt biases in the system, which mean that we have to do our work well early on, that we have to help parents well early on, and that's, again, a central point of what I'm trying to say. So now onto a bit of anthropology. There's a number of authors that I revere, and one is Bruce Perry, and Bruce Perry talks about the human brain, the modern human brain, not being designed for the modern age. Because for most of our lives, most of our history, human history, probably 90% of it, we have been hunter-gatherers in relatively small groups. It may be a relatively small group, but what actually happens in that group is that the child doesn't have 1 3/4 parents, which is the average today, but that child has effectively 20 parents, because there's a collective group of uncles, aunties, siblings, all of whom stimulate that child, all of whom help that child to grow in a way that we almost artificially need to fill in with in a modern society. And those things, I think, when we're looking at how the brain develops, yes, the brain does develop, the brain continues to evolve. Epigenetics tell us evolution can happen a lot quicker than we think, but the core of our evolutionary development is that we have actually always had much more nurture, much more love, and much more warmth in the life of a small child than can ever be provided by one wonderful parent who may be trying to raise that child perhaps on their own, as was often the case in my constituency. The other side of that is when a child isn't in almost an idyllic relationship with its parents. And many of you now will be familiar, if you weren't before, with the concept of adverse childhood experiences. Everybody heard that one? In terms of how, I think the original list, I think Felitti did some stuff on this in California in the 60s. I think it was 17 bad things that could happen to people, little ones, to traumatize them. And if you have a large number of those, then the impacts are not only, as we might expect, on the mental health of that growing child, but also the physical health that appears later on in life. And I think that original survey was what the Americans call middle class people. It wasn't necessarily the ones at the bottom of the heap. So it will be even more exaggerated by those young people who have that. Can I just, as a quick aside, can we please say adverse childhood experience, not ACE? Let's not make it a secret that only we know about. It's only a few more letters. Adverse childhood experience is bad for baby, is bad for us, is bad for our society. Let's call it what it is. And also, oddly, if you say in Nottingham something is ace, it means it's really good. And this is not really good. So, a bit of anthropology, but maybe a bit of culture and a bit of philosophy as well. I happen to think that low-grade social dysfunction, which is what a lot of us see every day in our lives, either in our own families or out there in the wider world, that I think that is the public health threat facing the world now. You could have said maybe 150, 200 years ago, cholera or whatever, we have to do everything, clean the water supplies, get the new pipes in, treat the plants, etc., etc. I think now, coming to grips with that is possibly one of the biggest threats. I think it's up there with the physical threats of things like climate change and other things. So it's almost threatening the way we live in our societies. And I want people to think about how important it is that we have not just a view and that we have great programs, but that we have a philosophy to counter that. And it is, I juxtapose this very simplistically. I was a politician, forgive me, no nuance, I'm just going to give it you in a very crude way. Late intervention versus early intervention. As someone once said to me, gold-plated ambulances at the bottom of the cliff or a $3 fence, wire fence at the top of the cliff. Yes, of course, we'll still need ambulances, yeah. But the whole society, the whole of our public services, the whole of our philanthropy should not be directed to the reactive and too little too late philosophy. Trying to change the mind of government on something like this has been one of my life's trials, and it still hasn't worked, but we're still at it, and we all have to be at it, whether we're in Canada or elsewhere, to say to government, look, whenever you come up with a program, whenever you say, oh, Roots of Empathy is a great program, as I said in Britain, in my city of Nottingham, it's a really fantastic program. Oh, can you prove how much we're going to get back if we spend £3,000 on your program? I guess I could, yeah. Okay, and what will the scores be of those children that go through the program? Will that be, I could spend a bit more money maybe and not spend it on the program, but I guess I could prove that. Have you ever heard anybody say, can you prove to me the costs of late intervention? The costs of waiting until a child becomes a child who has a violent streak, a child who needs rehabilitation in their reading or their mathematics, or a child who needs drug rehabilitation. I don't hear those questions being asked, and yet the amount of money spent on that belated intervention is a mountain compared to the molehill that we want to spend on the programs we know really work. So when I established the Early Intervention Foundation, I had one of the best people, evidence people in the world, happened to be available to become my director of evidence, Professor Leon Feinstein. He did that crossover graph many years ago. And he said to me, very wise words, perfect evidence is the enemy of good evidence. If it's good enough for us to actually crack on and do it and get going, rather than wait rather expensively 10, 20 years, you know, as a local member of parliament, I can't wait for my kids, who are 5 years of age, to be told what the program is they should have had when they're 15 years of age. So, of course, we are all evidence Jesuits or born-again Jesuits, born-again evidence, whatever religious metaphor you want to use, that we'd like to do that. We'd like to do it to the nth degree, but let's not actually cut our own throats by certain programs. I came across another one last week a really fantastic program about the use of digital technology to help mum and baby play games together. And the originator of that said, Mr. Allen, my turnover a year is $1 million. I've been asked to do an evidence-based assessment, which is coming in at almost the same amount of money. I will either have to fold my business or not do that and have people say I haven't got the evidence for my program. How crazy is that? We should be helping those people. So culturally, I think we've over and over got to say to people, if you intervene late, it is massively expensive and it is very rarely going to complete what it is you need to do with that person. You may have heard of a program called Nurse Family Partnership. It comes from David Olds in Denver in Colorado. Really fantastic program. And I was able to, by hook or by crook, find the money to get that to my kids in Nottingham North. And I did a little bit of calculation on the back of an envelope, and to help 120 young mums, teen mums by definition on that program, and their babies, another 120, although some were on their second baby, so let's round it up to 250 souls were helped by that program. Its cost was the same as putting 3 16-year-old young lads into a secure unit, a young offenders prison. 250 with life chances enhanced for the rest of their lives and the coming generations, or 3 put away, as we say in the UK, in prison. And I thought I was being very clever because I invited the president of our Supreme Court to have a look, see what we were doing. And I said, Lord Neuberger was his name. I said, Lord Neuberger. I told him this story. And you know what, Lord Neuberger? Of those 3, 2 will reoffend. Shouldn't be smart with the president of the Supreme Court. He said, Graham, you don't know all of it. We just don't catch the 3rd one. So for nothing for those kids, other than the fact they're going to reoffend, and thank you for putting me into a university of crime. I know how to open 10 other cars, which I didn't know before you put me in there. Or to help those people by sensible budgeting, sensible economics. We're into economics now. We're not talking about a nice program that we like and we think it's okay. We're talking about something that is life-saving. We're talking about something that interacts with our society on economics, on politics, on philosophy, on culture. And that's what we have to do. I'm conscious of somebody should show me something I'll just witter on forever till, oh my goodness, okay. So, one little argument, just to put away in the back of the brain, when people tell you what you're doing is what they say in the UK, I don't know if you got the expression here, the nanny state, where, government's telling you what to do. Actually, the definition for me of a nanny state is when you have to have billions and billions of dollars and pounds set aside for drug rehab, for prisons, for secure units, for extra police officers, for all those things that go wrong in someone's life if you don't invest just a little bit to help mother and child and a family. So just throw that back. Whenever anybody says, oh, the nanny state, you want the government to run. No, actually, you are now running everything. The government now is running everything. And we want to step away because have you ever met a child, once they're given that capability of social emotional capability, doesn't fly of their own accord? You have another problem, that they go off. I mean, the number of torches and batteries that my daughter had underneath the blankets reading, I don't know where she got the money for them. I don't know where it, but must have been a multitude because she was turned on by reading and wouldn't go to sleep despite every possible devious parental effort. She would always find a way of getting another torch to read under the sheets and read some more stuff. So, what a great problem to have. That's a problem You know, yeah, let's have a big government inquiry on tortures under the bed sheets. Keep those people happy for a little bit of while. So just a few key things about how we did it or didn't do it well in the UK or in England. Partnerships. You gotta love the people you're working with. Mary mentioned that I did a book with Ian Duncan Smith. I think we're on to number 10 now. Ian Duncan Smith was the leader of the Conservative Party. The reason we went to war in Iraq was because he went in the voting lobby, took all his party in the voting lobby with Tony Blair. If he hadn't have done that, we wouldn't have gone to Iraq. I should hate that guy. He's my best friend on early intervention. We don't talk about other stuff. We don't talk about Brexit and all that. You can't find the proverbial cigarette paper between us on that. He gets it. He gets that at least. And so that's why I work with him. And I say to you, if I can work with Ian Duncan Smith, why can't you work with the cops? Why can't you work with education? Why can't you work with health? Why can't you work cross-disciplinary so that you can develop these things? Look, it's difficult. Anyone married in the audience? Well, maybe not. But you know what? Maintaining a partnership? Come on. You've got to work at it. It's not always easy. You've got to develop some trust and you've got to do stuff together. And that's the way to do it. So in the end, I had the police in Nottingham were willing to fund health visitors. Just happened the guy that set up the police a million years ago, Sir Robert Peel, his first rule wasn't catch the bad guys, it was stop crime from happening in the first place in 1840 something. So the police were up for it locally. They were stopped by what we call the Home Office, the national level of government. This isn't what we spend the policing budget on. Health visitors, I mean, it was only a symbolic amount. And they gave me some symbolism. They taught me how difficult this would be to win over people at national level. So the next one, or have I gone way ahead of myself? I don't know. Just put up what you think looks nice. We got to doing this stuff on an all-party basis, so that was really important. Then I was able to do a couple of reports for government, and it was a Conservative government. Once again, if you want something to last a long while, you've got to do it engaging everybody. We had a brilliant program in the UK. My Labour government brought it in. It was called Sure Start. There was a Sure Start in every community. Wonderful. First time the Conservatives get in, it starts to get eroded and closed. Now they've closed 1,000 Sure Starts. Be smart. Give them some credit for setting up Sure Start in the first place, even though they weren't within a million miles of it. Bring them to the party. Give them the glass of champagne when it starts. Thank them for being there. And be a bit more than, I'm getting to the Machiavellian stage here, Brian. You can genuinely mean that you want to build alliances across party lines. And then it can be sustainable, because they can get it. Then you can work on them on the economic arguments again. If they happen to want to give the money away in tax cuts, well, that will be your choice if you get in. But we're finding you a way that you can do that. So try to make stuff across the party divide, just as you want to make it across the sector divide within all our different professions and areas that we do there. So as an upshot of this, I created the Early Intervention Foundation in the UK, and it's still going strong, I'm very pleased to say. And what it does is it does three basic things. I'm going to move on fairly quickly to 19, and that is assess, advise, and advocate. And I did it 3 A's because I was talking to politicians. They need something to remember something like this by. But assess is evidence-based. We know that. I don't need to go over that. Advice should really be advise, but yeah, we'll do the English lesson over the break. And that basically means having a place to go where you can ask the questions about the practice as well as the evidence. How do you do that? And so we wanted to set up, and have started to set up, 20 places where you can have exemplar practice, and we network people so that they can do that. An advocate is, you don't need me to tell you, just had a lecture on it from me, which is to actually speak up to power about why early intervention is a sensible thing to do. So in order that I can take a few questions, I'm going to wind up with just 2 things for the future. Firstly, jargon word, monetize. Sorry, I'll explain. Can you actually demonstrate how much money you save by a particular program? So we had an experiment in a place called Peterborough in England, where we had literally a captive audience in prison. Half those prisoners went through a program about developing their social and emotional capabilities, and the other half didn't. And we compared the numbers that came back after 1 year. Clearly, those people who had a bit more to go on in their life when they left prison were doing better. So we were able to put some numbers on that. That's a very simple one, and it's also relatively easy because you do literally have one source of inputs. The difficulty comes when you've got health of joining in and education and not quite sure which bit produces which effect. But you know what? If we can put a man on the moon, you can either put President Trump in the White House or you put a man on the moon. I'm going for the man on the moon. If you can do that, you can figure out a contract with your friends who are going to benefit on a particular program, or several programs, or many programs. So let's work on that. I'd like to see the market in early intervention programs as lucrative, as easy, and as accessible as investing in arms, pouring into a war zone, or into tobacco, or whatever else you want to invest your money in. Let's make it happen like that too. So I think there's a lot more to do on that. We've got something called Big Society Capital in the UK, which could actually work well, I think, as a model in other parts of the globe. We have a number of smaller institutions now, private sector institutions, who are doing this work, and maybe we need to encourage along. It's almost like local government bond issues. There's $1 trillion market in the US on local government bonds. You have got a structure in Canada, which I envy. You may not. You may wonder why I envy it, but we've got a very rigidly centralized system in the UK. But you've got a structure that does, believe it or not, allow a little bit more breathing space for origination and pioneering and developing stuff like that. And my last one is tracking, which is a big word to cover a load of things, which means if we really care about the life course, then why can't we just gently, not being too intrusive, see what happens through a person's life, particularly a child? If I can press a button arriving at Toronto on my computer that says what's happening in Toronto, and then be inundated by dozens of emails and all sorts of stuff coming back at me through my own computer, can't we just do something sensible with our technology, which is privately to maintain a track where something that somebody sees, perhaps roots of empathy person, perhaps a teacher, perhaps a police officer, whatever, where there are little flags which mean we can intervene to preempt. And I've taken a long while to say that word, to preempt. Early intervention doesn't mean early when something's gone wrong. Early intervention means to preempt the thing going wrong in the first place, if that's at all possible. So tracking, there's loads of different methods to do this. And that's another area where I would definitely try to warm people up to look at that. Okay, well, I'm coming to the end of my time, and the last thing I want to show you is a little clip. And Brian was talking about how much is in you, in your DNA, and how much do you learn. Well, this is a little clip. I hope my friends, Chris at the back, will be able to tee it up and play, which is a 10-minute-old baby. And Dad is really desperate to get the baby to imitate him. Can't do it, can you, when they're 10 minutes old? Their eyes aren't open. Waste of time. Won't happen.
Xavier, hello. Only 10 minutes old, Xavier's infant senses are bombarded with new sights, sounds, and feelings. He watches his father pull faces, and then slowly responds. This isn't conscious mimicry. Xavier doesn't even know he has a face. But he's managing to translate what he sees into similar actions of his own. Copy, Daddy.
So stick your tongue out at the late interveners. Thank you very much.